Finding life a bit complex? Confusing? Aware that your old strategies aren't working? Why not ask Pam and Marilyn? This is the Irreverent Therapists, and we're here to add some clarity, humor, and a bit of what might be considered blasphemy to your day.
Welcome, everyone, to the Irreverent Therapist. I'm Marilyn Bradford, and joining me is Pam Hodling. Hi, Pam.
Hey, Marilyn, and hello, everybody.
Have you been having an irreverent day? That's what I want to know.
I have had a very irreverent day.
Me too. I had a lunch where we were comparing Donald Trump to ISIS. It was very interesting. That might not be that irreverent. Anyway, so today we're talking about change. The title of our show is What Does Change Mean to You? Life involves many changes: learning to walk, going to school, navigating relationships and jobs, as well as death or failing health of loved ones and other challenges. What do you do with change? Or rather, what do you do with change? Does it stress you out? Does it make you feel so uncomfortable that you avoid it at almost any cost? Change, I'm running the other direction. What if change could be easy? What if it was something to look forward to rather than running away from? Join the Irreverent Therapist for a change to the way you approach change. How does it get better than that?
Awesome.
So, Pam and I were talking a little bit earlier that we both had enormous amounts of change in our lives. Marriages and divorces, and of course she has kids, and jobs and moves, and this falling apart and this coming together. And one of the things that I want to start off by talking about is there's an index, and now I cannot remember the name of it.
Oh, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, awesome. I thought you would. It's the stress index, right?
Yeah, it's like a stress index, and it rates things, and not just things like, someone dying, which you think of as a negative thing, but marriage, having a child, giving birth, there's a new job, and it gives each of these kind of life things a score, and you check off what all you have going on. I remember one year in my life, I had getting married, parent dying, new job, moving,
It's amazing you were in a puddle on the Continental Divide.
Well, it's interesting. So, Marilyn, this might surprise you about me, knowing me now, although maybe I've talked about it some, and so you'd know this, but I used to be someone, in our description where it says, does it make you so uncomfortable you avoid it at almost any cost and you want to run away from change? That was me growing up. I used to put a tremendous amount of energy into trying to keep everything the same around me and in my life, and that's how I felt safe.
You weren't much of a control freak, were you?
No, I was no control freak at all, and I still am not.
Right.
Now I'm a control freak, but I'm totally happy and look forward to having things change.
Well, we'll talk about my childhood in a bit, but which is not all that different than what you were saying. But one more thing I want to say about that stress test that I thought was fascinating when I first heard it was that the things that you mentioned, like marriage and the birth of a child and getting a new job and inheriting money, actually came up as stressful as things like the death of a family member or losing a job. In other words, positive change was perceived as stressful as negative change. And I was like, wow, we really don't like change as a species, do we? It was rather startling.
Yeah. And, and I think that's the way to look at it, is all those things on that list have to do with change.
Yes.
And if you're someone for whom change is easy and you embrace it, then it's not a stressor. But that is not true of most people. Most people find change to be somewhat stressful.
I was looking at that. It's like, and I wonder how much of it is a societal thing in a weird way, because children change all the time, and we actually encourage it. It's like, oh my gosh, she said her first word. He's walking. He took a step. So these are actually huge changes in infants and young children's lives. But my sense is that because we encourage them, they don't think it's wrong.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting, I mean, I can't tell you the age anymore, although I know I noticed it at the time. But I can tell you there was a time when that changed for my kids, like where they were, you know, embracing change and excited about new things. And then suddenly, like kind of all at the same time, there was this awareness of peers and wanting to fit in and, you know, change becoming this thing that's, oh, now what if I can't do this? And what if I'm not good enough? And that kind of thing. And so you know, that's just to say, yeah, you might be right that it's kind of a societal thing.
Well, I just had a thought, which may be a brainstorm or just a droplet of nothing. But what came to mind was when we're very young, there's no separation between us and our parents and the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And so here's my question, Pam, and you've had kids and I haven't, so I'll ask you, and I don't really work with children. Do you have a sense that I'm going to call it fear of change or the anxiety associated with change, say in your kids or what you've noticed in other kids, happens when they begin to develop this separate sense of self, and then of course there's exclusion and comparison and all of that kind of stuff?
I would say that's definitely part of it because, yeah. And then, you know, then here's bringing the access, you know, tools that Marilyn and I use into it. Because there's not just when they hit that age, but when everyone around them hits that age, and then how much are they aware of everybody else?
Yes, and picking up their separation and anxiety and all of those kinds of things.
Exactly.
So is the desire to control change, could it be we're waxing rather philosophical today, but never mind. Could the desire to control change be something like, well, there is the whole idea, if nothing changes, I can control it. I know what everything is, you know. But could it also be some kind of, Gary would probably say I'm doing my psychological crapola, but search for that oneness that we had initially?
Well, I would back it up a bit and say, you know, like whether we're talking about the control piece or the avoiding change piece, because to me, control is one way of trying to get change paced to be a pace that you can handle it, right? So I think that desire to control change or, you know, put it off or avoid it or whatever can come from a lot of different things for different people. Like for me, you know, growing up, there was always this feeling that stuff's going to be more than I can handle.
Oh, yeah.
So if I know what's going on here, you know, if I know I can handle this, as long as it doesn't change, I'm okay. So a lot of my stuff came from trying to be okay and feel okay. For someone else, it might, you know, it could be totally different motivation.
Well, when you were talking about that, what came to mind was, you know, all this work I do with addiction, and I was talking with a client today whose mother was a raging alcoholic when he was quite young, was that his dad left the scene. His mother was so unpredictable that change was dangerous.
Yes. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. If you're living with someone violent and, you know,
or even neglectful and erratic and totally inconsistent.
Yeah. Yeah. And see, so for me, that resistance to change is coming from a different kind of place. Yeah. And I think there can be a whole lot of different you know, for each person, that list of what it is about change that makes it hard. You know, maybe you're a perfectionist, or, you know, maybe you just like the way things are and think they should always be that way. Or, I mean, there's all kinds of things. But getting back to your question then about, I just wanted to put that in there before
I think that's
got back to what you were saying, which was, so I think that a motivation for avoiding change could be trying to get that sense of oneness again. But for some people, that wouldn't be what it's about.
It's about safety or surviving or, not feeling overwhelmed or all kinds of things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that makes total sense. Interestingly, and this is kind of a non sequitur, but not really, I read something in the newspaper the other day about how, so many of the brilliant discoveries that have been made, like with Einstein and Madame Curie, came from immigrants who completely changed their lives. And the point was that basically, when you're thrust into a totally new environment, you have to really be present and think it's not quite it, but adjust and be willing to have new ideas about things and accept new ideas. And they were talking about how it seemed to open these people up to being able to see in a totally different way, because they weren't thinking that, well, food is this. They were like, oh my gosh, food has totally changed. Language is totally changed. Well, what else could change?
Right.
So, I don't know.
Well, that makes so much sense. I mean, we've done I don't know how recently, but sometime in the last couple of months, some shows where we were talking about being on autopilot.
Yes.
And it's like, if you're on autopilot, there's very little creative energy.
Right.
And, what you're talking about is when you're willing to be an allowance of a whole lot of change, there is no autopilot.
Yes.
And so creating just comes right along with that.
Well, it's either going into a hole and hiding and going into the fetal position, or creating.
That's true.
That's sort of interesting, because really change always creates choice points. I'm going to write that down.
That's brilliant, Marilyn. I'm writing it down too.
And we're about to go to break. And when we come back, we can talk more about, we've talked a lot about why people are resistant to change. We can talk about, what you can do with that.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Welcome to The Gathering Around My Kitchen Table on Equilarium FM, Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join my guests as we integrate spirituality into everyday reality with vibrant conversations, inspired interviews, and my latest channeled guidance to inspire and brighten your day. I'm Claire Johnson, and together we'll be raising vibrations across the nations.
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Have you bought into the idea that you have to work hard for your money, that business is hard? I will share some dynamic access consciousness tools to get you out of your own way so you can create a business that actually succeeds. Join me, Simone Millisers, on The Joy of Business at 4 p.m. Mondays Eastern.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm Marilyn Bradford, joined by Pam Hodling, and this is the Irreverent Therapist, and we are talking about change. Change, change, change. Change the fools. So, maybe we could talk about different kinds of change, like tomorrow's your birthday, happy birthday. They say it's your birthday. And a lot of people have a lot of stuff around birthdays and age and the change of aging. Or we could talk about what people can do to get a different perspective on change. Or we could talk about not just why people resist change, but what happens. There's so many things we could talk about. What do you think, Pam?
Well, I mean, what's coming up for me is like the necessity of change. I mean, the world's constantly changing. Mm-hmm. Your body isn't the same, on a cellular level right now as it was 5 minutes ago.
Are you telling me I don't look 18 anymore?
I am not telling you that. I'm telling you that.
Gee!
No, but it's more like all these things that we think of as solid and stable and, because we tend to, we know, okay, I could lose weight, I could put weight on, I can eat a healthier diet and my body will be healthy, we think of our bodies changing that way, but we basically look at our bodies like, well, this is my body, this is what I'm stuck with. Or, this is the job I have and I don't really have another choice. It's like there's so many things that we think of as static that aren't. Yeah.
Solid that aren't solid.
Right. And so there's things we depend on for showing up the same way that can't possibly, right? And then on the other hand, there's things we want to change that we feel like we can't change. I just think there's so many things about change and, what is it that people are so resistant to change?
Well, one of the
things, is it really needed?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you were talking, I was thinking a lot about that whole sense of trying to make things solid rather than flowing.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of times because, this is a conclusion sort of, but I think go for it. Go for your conclusions, Marilyn. I think a lot of times people want a solid reference point.
Yeah.
I am this person. It's so weird because in therapy there's this sense of solid self. And I think both you and I know that, sorry guys, that does not actually exist unless you fabricate it and that it's going to be put through the ringer because it can't change.
Yeah.
And
I'm having an aha. Don't let me forget it.
Cool. Have your aha right now.
Okay. Well, so my aha, because to me, so much of the people not wanting things to change has to do with, or wanting things to be solid and stable. It has to do with security and safety. Yes. Right? Yes. It's like, okay, if I know I've got a good job and, a house over, roof over my head and blah, 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 then I know I'm going to be okay. Right. Yeah. And I can plan for the future. Now that safety and security is a total myth.
Yes.
Right? Because you could have an earthquake and your house could be gone.
Well, the thing, I mean, and that, my mind is going in a godzillion different directions, but I was working with a client the other day and we were talking about his desire to try to control the future.
Yeah.
I'm like, it ain't happening, dude. But I said the interesting thing is you actually want to control the things you can't control.
Yeah.
That are going to change beyond your control. But you haven't actually stepped into controlling the things you can control, which is your reactions to things.
Yeah.
And that's a little aside, but I think it gets to the point too. Go ahead.
Oh, because I mean the cliff I was going to jump off of.
Yay! You call ourselves the bungee therapists.
Yeah, the bungee therapist. Because I know Marilyn and I both function from this place, which is or space, which is that. Okay, there is no true safety and security. I think we've even done a show on this. If you're willing to be aware, that's where you can actually have that control or security. It's like, I can't, my house could get, burned up in a wildfire. My job could end because the company goes belly up or all kinds of things. But if I'm willing to be aware, that's a whole different thing. And that's a very dynamic embracing of change space to be, whereas the other one, the safety security thing, is like if I can pin down enough things in an okay way, then I'm all right.
Well, and let me expand on that a little bit, because I don't think people get what awareness can create. If you're truly aware, you won't be in your house when it burns down. If you're truly aware, you'll change jobs, or it's coming and you'll do something different. And I'm reminded of the time, and this was when I first started doing Access, and I had regular clients Wednesday afternoons, boink, 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 boink. And it was the strangest thing. That week, a couple of clients canceled, and then I thought, I only have one client, and I really need to get my bars run. And so I moved that other client, and I was in my house with an Access friend running bars.
Yeah.
And my partner, I had two therapists shared a space with a waiting room and 2 offices and a restroom. And I found out later she'd forgotten her cell phone, so they couldn't contact me. She went into her office and her client pulled a gun on her. She eventually talked him out to letting her go, but I would have been hostage in the other office at this time. Normally, this was my most, I don't know what to call it, but unmoving time schedule that Wednesday afternoon. And eventually she got out. They called a SWAT team. I mean, literally, there was a 6-hour standoff. He ended up committing suicide, and the SWAT team broke down all the doors in our office. But the point was, there was part of me that knew just not to be there.
Yeah. Well, I have a recent, not nearly as dramatic example. But so last Friday, my daughter goes to school. Her friend is homeschooled, and the friend had texted me, "Hey, can I come over after school?" And I said no. Now, rationally, to me, I was like, well, this is the night my kids moved back with me after being with their dad for the week. And, I'd kind of like that time for us. Mm-hmm. But that wasn't actually it. It was just energetically, no.
You knew no. Yeah.
I don't know why, but yes. I know it's no. So when I picked my daughter up from school, she was kind of upset about a few things, and we kind of pulled over to a pretty place and talked. And she said, well, can we go drive up the ski hill? She just felt like driving somewhere pretty. And so we drove up the ski hill. It's a mountain. It's, snow and everything like that. And in the course of this conversation, we started talking about this thing when she was a really little kid, like 4 years old. She started ice skating, and being a 4-year-old, she decided to lick a metal pole and got her tongue stuck to, basically a traumatic experience. Ever since then, if you mention ice skating, she cringes, she hides her head, like all this stuff. So now she's 13, and I was like, hey, this group you're part of is going ice skating next week. She's like, nah, blah. And I was like, do you actually want that to run your life?
Right.
And she was like, no. So we started using Access tools and clearing things. And she was like, I want to go ice skating. And we went to the ice rink and we said, hey, she's been traumatized about ice skating for years. Is there someone here who could give her a private lesson? She wants to get out on the ice.
Cool.
And they did. And she went ice skating.
That is awesome.
Yeah. And it's like, she was beaming. She was just like everything in her being. She had been so locked under this fear, and she decided to change it. So, so there's two things. One is, when you're ready to change something, you can change things.
Yes, you can.
But also, I had the awareness, because I know if her friend was coming over, we would have just gone home.
Yes.
And she and I would never have had the conversations we had that led to, or, not now, who knows, someday we would have, but, and that's that awareness. Now, I couldn't control her out of being afraid of ice.
Right.
But by being willing to be present in the moment and engage with the change when she was willing to have it, we were able to change it.
That is so awesome. That is really cool, because one of the things you're bringing up, Pam, is that resistance to change and keeping things the way they are locks in everything that's not working in your life
Yeah.
Whether it's job, family, relationships, past, whatever. It's like you can't, if you build a castle wall, okay, maybe the so-called evil won't come in, but what's there already that's not working can't get out and leave either.
Well, and there's also, like, if I had a stagnant view of my daughter, okay, she's afraid of ice. She's, she's phobic about ice. You know, being a therapist, I say phobia about ice. I could lock her into that.
Yes.
Instead, by being willing to have her change and me change and things change, that I'm not someone who runs from change, then when the door opened a little bit, we both, you know, it's like we could go, oh, hey, what can we do with this? What's possible here? Rather than, and I was willing to have her change instantaneously, that she doesn't need years of therapy to get over it.
She just needs a few pocking and potting and choice. That's so cool. Yeah. And I became aware today, because I was having lunch with another therapist, that a lot of people go to therapy not so much to change, but to try to adjust to what they've made solid.
Yeah.
And when you get a client who truly wants to change, it's like, wow, you know, what can we do from here on?
Yeah.
And it's fine. I mean, I never push clients into it, because my point of view is they're paying for it. And unless it's like truly harmful to another being, I'm happy to support them in whatever they would like to use the therapy for. But it's mostly to process the past so that they can be and find the solid self that they want to be. But I think that's why, I mean, I think it's Woody Allen, you know, you're always just going to be your neuroses. You don't have to always be your neuroses. But if you don't want to be your neuroses in your past, you do have to be willing to change. So we're about to go to a break, and when we come back, we'll talk more of the benefits of change and some of the things that you can do to wipe out all of that resistance or thinking that not being solid is a terrible bad thing.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Are you ready to shift your energy, consciousness, and limiting beliefs? Join me, Shefali Burns, every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern on Shifting with Shefali here on OMTimes Radio. Shift the blocks, limitations, and negative energies that have kept you from experiencing a life filled with joy, peace, love, abundance, and happiness. Are you ready to shift with Shefali? Are you ready to shine your brilliance?
Being a radio host on IOM FM allows you to build your show on a rich platform with the power of the internet to fulfill your outreach goals and connect with a very specialized and global online audience, unlimited by time and distance. OMTimes Radio will provide you with web relevance, a recognizable conscious brand, and with the standard of excellence that has accompanied every single OMTimes endeavor. Host your show with OMTimes Radio Network. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Hey ladies, do you want to have that good hair day feeling all the time? Gentlemen, would you want your special someone to have that glow, letting you know she's feeling completely satisfied? This feeling and that glow can be yours by embracing your sexual power. So join me, Rachel Kenley, award-winning romance author, on the O-Spot. The O-Spot will guide you to that peak with guest interviews, book discussions, and conversations on the thrills of sexual empowerment. Put the zing back in your life. come up and see me sometime on the O Spot, live on Hump Day at 10 p.m. Eastern.
The future of Internet radio is here. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm Marilyn Bradford, and I'm joined by Pam Hodling. We are the Irreverent Therapist, or the bungee jumping therapists.
I like the bungee jumping
I
therapist.
do too. It fits us. And we're talking about change. And one of the things I was thinking about over the break, and I'm sorry my chair was scraping around. I was trying to get comfortable. And my pillow fell out, was that if something doesn't change, it gets kind of stale. I remember I had a client once who was this absolutely brilliant teen, but she was talking about what a perfectionist she was. And I went, "Oh, you're a plastic flower." And she was like, "What?" And I'm like, "You're a plastic flower. It has to be perfect. It can't be a bud and then a full bloom and then all the the petals drop off."
Yeah.
She was like, "Wow." And it was very interesting because she was never a perfectionist after that. And you mentioned this earlier, Pam, that everything changes all the time. And if you try to keep something the same, it begins to get kind of weird and stagnant and yucky. And you either have to go on autopilot or it's just like, bleh.
Yeah.
And actually, even with our show, The Irreverent Therapist, we'd been talking, I don't know, maybe it was a month or two ago about, this is a great show and we love it. And we've been doing, because we were actually on a different network for a couple of years before we found the wonderful OMTimes. But, we're talking about, we got to do something. It needs to change. So we're having a book written, or we're writing a book. I'm not sure. But we started playing with all these different ideas, and all of a sudden the energy expanded again. Right. And that's one of the things, change, there's a real connection between change and life and living. And if you're not changing, you're basically dying.
Yeah.
Psychologically, emotionally, even if you're not dying physically. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and also, I was just thinking about so much of suffering comes to me from resistance to change.
Yes.
Right. So say my mom's dying, and if I no, my mom has to be here, I'm so resistant to that change that someone who has been in my daily life now won't. There's not just, someone's dying and there's that grief, but there's this added suffering on top of how terrible it is, and this is too soon. And I mean, there's just, all these different things. Whereas if it's like, the flower, there's the bud, it blooms, it dies, everything changes. Like, I know when my mom died, I didn't have these words for it, but while there was a lot of grief, there was total allowance of the fact that she was dying. Mm-hmm. I wasn't resisting it. Mm-hmm. And so, other people in my family who were suffered and had long-term effects from her death. Whereas for me, it was a moment by moment. What do I require in this moment to deal with this and to get through this and whatever? And it was a much, it's hard to say easy when someone dies, but it was much easier on me. Cause I didn't have all that point of view of this should never change. Yeah. She should always be here.
That's really, that brings up lots for me. And one of them was when my sister died, and she died when I was 29, I think. I was in total resistance to it. I was holding on to her, and I really did create a lot of suffering for myself. And in retrospect, I think she wanted to go. And even if she did, we don't want to get into that conversation right now. Right. But I know that I created more difficulty by resisting. And at one point, she actually couldn't speak at that point, but she wrote on a piece of paper, "Let me go."
Yeah.
And that was like, whoa. Recently I've been dealing with my mom, who's not, I can't say she's dying, but she's very much deteriorating. I've been down in Texas. I was thinking something like 36 days in the past 2 months on different trips. And I was talking to Gary Douglas, the founder of Access, and I was like, Gary, I'm just in resistance and reaction. And he's like, Marilyn, just look at it as you're doing what's required. What's required in this 10 seconds? And it was so freeing, Pam.
Yeah.
Because she was acting a little out of control at certain points, and we were trying to get her to agree to go into a locked care unit. And I'm like, okay, so what's required here? What would create more? And I use the Access tools of asking questions, which is an awesome thing to do when you're faced with change.
Yeah.
And essentially, even though this was the most difficult visit I'd had of all of the visits, I was also able to to choose to be happy, to not go down the rabbit hole that much, and, to just continuously ask questions and actually use the awesome manipulating tools. And I'm using manipulating in the sense of my mother was, I don't know if I'll go into it. What the heck? She's a person who really values her freedom, and she was having to give up her apartment. So there was some extreme, and she's in her late 90s, extreme resistance. But I just said, okay, so what can I do to contribute? And it was to tell her that I'd support her in whatever she wanted. And eventually she said, I need to go into that wing.
And it was able to be her choice.
And it was able to be her choice.
Do it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there was no force or resistance or solidification. But I'm just so grateful. I mean, this seems like a difficult thing. And it is in some ways when we're caring for an aging parent. On the other hand, it's when we were talking about the flower, I was thinking about Mom, and I was also thinking about this conversation I had with this client earlier today. And it's like Einstein said, there's really only one question that people have to answer. Is the universe friendly or is it hostile? And a lot of times I think the resistance to change is about, I don't believe that something good could also come along.
Yeah.
There's going to be another beautiful flower. Now, my mother is obviously on her way out, however it looks or takes. Is there going to be another mother for me? No. But there are going to be other relationships and wonderful experiences, and holding on and trying not to let her die. Or, it was clear how much she was failing in a lot of ways. She really wanted to go shopping, and I took her shopping, and she basically, we were having trouble in the dressing room with her even standing up to try on clothes. But it was what it was. I didn't make it wrong or wish it wasn't. I just did what I could to support her and help her be with whatever she was doing. And there's a lot about allowance in that, I think.
Yeah.
That allowance is one of the real keys to dealing with change.
Well, and, you just in this last bit mentioned, and also before the break, you mentioned resistance to change. Mm-hmm. And it's like, to me, so much of the resistance to change has to do with points of view.
Yes.
With everything you were just talking about, if you had the point of view of how terrible it is that your mom's deteriorating and what am I going to do without her? And, that you could have all these points of view that put you into tremendous resistance to what's going on, that then increases your suffering. So the whole time you're there, you're worrying about her and you can't believe this is happening and what am I going to do? And blah, 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 right? Yeah. All that kind of stuff. And instead, because you're willing to embrace change, you were able to, while it was, because I talked to you on and off during this time. It was intense, right?
Yeah,
it was intense. There's a lot going on, a lot of decisions to make, navigating your mom and her moods and her state of mind in the moment and all that stuff. So it doesn't take that away, but you were able to actually enjoy yourself and feel relaxed and be glad to be with her and handle each thing as it came up very effectively because you didn't have all the points of view on top of everything that was going on.
Yeah, I really let go of my filters, and it was such a freeing experience. I've been, it's something I've been working on for a long time, obviously, but just being there, what's required here, what can I contribute? And not going to, this is terrible, this is horrible, all those kinds of things. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what awareness is about. It is what it is. And anytime we're in judgment, we actually stop ourselves from being aware. And we can really, like I was doing to my sister, we can actually, if not do harm to people, it's not kind to hold on to people who are dying, who are ready to go, or to try to make people be who we want them to be. Or, you know, it was interesting because I remember Gary was talking about when his father died. I think he was 17. And he said he was in a lot of grief. And then he finally said, what's really going on here? Because he hadn't had that close of a relationship with his dad, I don't think. But what he said was, I realized that I was angry that my life was changing.
Yeah.
You know, my life was never going to be the same once my dad was gone.
Well, and the whole thing, I don't know if I can say it exactly the way you said it, but just a moment ago when you said, you know, when we're trying to get people to be who we think they should be, or how we want them to be.
Yeah.
I mean, that to me is so much of what goes on in relationships.
Yeah.
Where you don't want the other person to change because you want them to show up and be for you the way you expect them to be and show up for you.
And you've not been living up to my expectations.
I know. I've been slacking off.
You've been totally slacking off. I'm going to cut your bungee cord.
Yeah, but it's like, you know, like that's a perfect example of where we resist change is when we're in a relationship with someone, whether it's a parent-child or a romantic relationship, and we want them to not change because we like whatever it is they're doing for us. Yeah. Whereas to truly have a healthy, expansive relationship, you have to both be able to change constantly.
Yes, you do. And you have to be willing to allow the other person to be who they are, not who you would like them to be.
Yeah.
You know, because I think that's one of the things. Yeah. And a lot of times I think people want to, well, I married this person and now you're somebody different.
Yeah.
You know?
How dare you change it?
How dare you change? I want you to be the person I married. I'm sorry, I'm alive. All right, on that note, we are going to another break, and we will be back with a little bit more about change.
Feed your soul with waves of consciousness on OMTimes Radio.
Come heal yourself. What is healing? Healing is nothing but connecting with your all-knowing higher self that already has solutions to all your problems and is always there to guide you. Through this show, we help you to connect with that you are and tap into that innate potential you have to transform your life and fly high. Please join me, your host Monica Goyal, every Sunday, 7 p.m. Pacific. Namaste.
Host your show on IOM-FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM-FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community. As difficult as it is to believe, there are places in Africa where human traffickers sell albino children and their body parts for use in magic rituals. Humanity Healing International is actively working in Uganda to change this paradigm. The Albino Rescue Project finds albino children who are at risk and places them in safe schools and environments where they can learn and grow free from fear. To learn more or to sponsor a child, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Eros Evolution is where sexuality and spirituality meets. Join me, clinical sexologist Martha Tara Lee, on Arrows Evolution on Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm Marilyn Bradford, the Irreverent Therapist with Pam Hodling, and we are in the last section of our show today on change. And I was thinking, Pam, maybe we could just give some people some suggestions of some of the things that they can do to overcome resistance and reaction to change, since it is part of life. It's going to happen with or without you. Hello.
Yes.
And one of the things that came up for me was the willingness to trust yourself to deal with whatever comes along.
Yes.
And that is just seminal to being able to deal with change. And I think that the more we try to control and resist change, the more we actually reinforce the idea that we won't be able to deal with things, which is so, that could be maybe we should do a show on trusting yourself.
Oh, I think we should. I'm writing that down.
Okay, that's a whole show. And people are like, yeah, great, 10 minutes left. How do I do that?
6 minutes, Marilyn. 6 minutes left.
No. Don't we have till 59? We have 11 minutes.
Okay.
I would say start slowly. But trusting yourself is the ticket. Trusting that you know that you can create whatever you'd like, and that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay.
Yeah. And to me also, there's several, access tools you can use for clearing points of view. One of them's the clearing statement. There's getting your bars run, but all the points of view you have about change. I won't be okay if this changes. What if I don't know what to do? All those kinds of things that run through your head, you can use something like the clearing statement. So, say, okay, Marilyn, give me an example of something you might be afraid about having it change.
What if I lose my job?
Okay, so all you have to do is go, okay, everywhere I'm afraid of losing my job, destroy it, uncreate it, times a godzillion. Right and wrong, good and bad, pod, poc, all nine shorts, boys, and beyonds. That's the access clearing statement, which you can look up on theclearingstatement.com. But basically, it brings up an energy and then clears it away. Right. What's another thing you might be afraid of?
What if my husband betrays me and has an affair with somebody else?
Okay, so you could even just go, everything that is, or, ask yourself the question, what if my husband, betrays me and sleeps with somebody else? And the energy that comes up with that, then you just use that clearing statement. And getting your bars run is an energy process where someone puts their hands on your head and it clears all these kinds of points of view, the energy of it that you've stored. So that's what, two things right there I would do a lot.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
Part of how I got from being someone who was trying to control everything and be afraid of change to someone who loves to control things and knows it, relishes it, and is totally happy to change.
Right, exactly. And if it's something doesn't work, another one is to give up expectations.
Yes.
Living in 10-second increments is one of the Access Consciousness 10 Keys to Total Freedom. And it's it makes such a difference, because if I say, I expect you to do blah, 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 and then you don't do it, I have to, because that's the only thing I put into the future that's possible, that's going to be okay.
Yeah.
But if I'm like, well, hey, what do you think, Pam? Well, okay, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. What else is possible here?
Yeah.
And it's that living in 10 seconds and asking questions all along the way.
Yeah.
And we ask so many questions about the shows, about what's going on, but it makes it all easy.
Yes. And, back at the beginning of the show when we were talking about, different things that go on for people that make them, want to resist change. They want things to be perfect, or they want to feel safe and secure. All those points of view, you can, again, use the clearing statement, get your bars run, interesting point of view. I have this point of view that I have to get it perfect and I have to get it right. Basically, any of these tools we use that get you to look at it and go, oh, this is just a point of view I have. This isn't etched in stone. This isn't the way it is. This is just a moment in time where I have this idea and I can change it.
And it's just a judgment holding it in place. And all judgments are arbitrary. And another thing I wanted to mention, if you're interested in being more willing to work with change or be with change, is to drop your barriers. When people are so barriered up, then the change comes, but it's almost like there's this huge wall between them and the change, and they can't, it's kind of like the knights are hiding behind the castle. So if you can just absolutely take a deep breath in, drop your barriers, and realize that nothing bad's going to happen. Because when you have all your barriers up, you're actually operating from the assumption and the conclusion that you're weak and small and nothing, and that anything out there is going to get you.
Well, and kind of along with that, what it makes me think of, this is kind of a catch-22. It's like, I think sometimes people are resistant to or afraid of change because they've already decided they can't change something. So it doesn't make logical sense.
Oh no, we're not talking logic here.
We're not talking logic here. If you could logic your way out of not wanting things to change, you would have done it by now.
Yes.
But what was coming to me is a question I use all the time, and I know Marilyn does too, is what would it take to change this?
Yes.
Like anything that's going on in my life that I'd like to create differently, I can ask, okay, so what would it take to change this? Or what energy, space, and consciousness can I be that would allow me to create something totally different? For me, part of embracing change has been the acknowledgement that I can actually change all kinds of things. So it kind of goes hand in hand. So what if you say you find yourself being someone who's really resistant to change? What if you ask yourself on and off all day, what would it take to change this? Well, what would it take to change this? What would it take to change this? And then if all kinds of crap comes up, like, what if it changes? Then you use the clearing statement and some of these other tools that we're talking about.
Well, and I think one thing that we're saying is that it does take a little work, folks. It takes developing a muscle. And
Actually, I'm going to stop you.
All right.
It takes work, but not the hard work. Like, oh my gosh, this takes forever to change.
Oh, that's true.
I'd say tenacity, like diligence.
Oh, I like that better.
Yeah.
Yes. Scrap what I said. It takes tenacity.
Yeah, because it's actually quite easy to change it, but it's about continually using the tools, not just I'm using this for 5 minutes and now I'm done and everything will be perfect forever.
Right. Right. And I just realized something, Pam, that we take for granted, which is it's the willingness to give up being right. Like when you said, what did I say? I said something.
You said, I don't know exactly which thing you said you're talking about.
Well, this last thing when I said no, scrap what I said, tenacity is, that you have to develop the muscle, that it takes a lot, something. Anyway.
Yeah, you have to develop, it's the work. That's what we scrap.
Work. Yeah.
The muscle part, yes.
But the point is that, using these tools for both of us, we're both aware if the other person says something that's more accurate, correct, and expansive, we go, oh yeah, yours, not mine.
Yeah.
There's no need to be right anymore. And that creates an enormous freedom.
Yes. Yes, because it's like, it's easy to create when you're not judging whether you're creating it right or creating it wrong.
Right. And you're doing your separation thing.
If you're caught up in it could be right or wrong, then that's where I'm going to wait and not create till I know I got it right and I know it's going to work. And otherwise I'd rather have it not change because I'd much rather settle for the crap I have than change and have it be worse. See, that would be a point of view you could pot and pock.
I could pot and pock that point of view. I think that sounds like an excellent idea, actually. Okay, so now we have 2 minutes left. Is there anything else that you'd like to say, Pam, about this before we talk about next week's show?
Well,
or is next week? Next week is
it's a replay.
Replay. Okay.
Yeah. So, I just want to say that I think so often we do settle for the crap we have.
Yeah.
Rather than choosing to change because we don't know what the change is going to bring. We don't trust ourselves to create, going back to what you said. So what if you actually just play with it and say, well, okay, for a week, I'm going to play with a lot of change and asking questions and using this clearing statement and just see a week from now. Do I like where I am better?
One quick thing. One of the assignments I always give my clients who are working on change is do one thing different every day. Yes. Even if it's like having something different for breakfast or going to work a different way, because that will begin to ease you into, we'll just call it the joy of change.
Oh, I like that. We should write a book, The Joy of Change.
We are writing a book, but we could write another one.
Book number 2.
Number 2, The Joy of Change. I like it. All right, folks. So next week, what are we doing, Pam?
We are doing What Do You Love About Overwhelm?
Which is what you get when you're trying to resist change, by the way.
Exactly. So, and that's a replay because we're both going to be traveling, but then 2 weeks from now, we'll both be back live again.
And then we're doing Not the Obvious Abuse, which is going to be a really interesting show on some of the some of the more hidden forms of abuse that we may be enduring without even realizing what's going on. And once again, learning that you can change those things.
Yes. Yeah. We're all about change.
We're all about change all the time because change is what life's about. Look outside. Changes all the time. We had snow today. Just a little bit, but enough. So anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the Irreverent Therapists. And we hope you'll listen in next week and in the weeks after that too.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.